Whatever.
Hi Playmates, how are you? It's Arista here. So I've been trying out 7 Nights 2 for some time now and wanted to share with you my thoughts on this beautiful gacha RPG.
Amazing. As if it was ordained from the beginning.
This review is going to be strictly based on my experience with the game so far, so I hope it helps you see if you're wanting to try this game out, even though it's been out for a couple months now. First off, thank you to everyone that recommended this game for me. I think I'm finally at a place where I can kind of talk about my thoughts and review this game a little bit more objectively. One of the most successful aspects of this game is its ability to grab you from the beginning. It's really important, especially with so many options out there now, that a game is able to capture attention from the moment that you log in for the first time. Because let's face it, we will eventually grow out of games, whether that be in a couple days or several years, but eventually even games we love will stop playing. So to incite that first impression is great, so that as a player you have some incentive to keep playing, even though the inevitable boring and mundane parts are sure to pop off after you spend some time on the game itself. And that was the case with 7 Nights 2. The opening act, the aesthetics, and I just don't mean the graphic quality, but the camera angle movements and the dialogue was exciting and very immersive. I've never played the original 7 Nights, but it wasn't too hard to understand what was going on as a new player with the world and chaos and the power of the destruction stone and blah blah blah, and pick up bits and pieces from the carryover from the prequel game. Eventually playing through the game though, I did start to pick up on what I think is in general a little weak point, and I mean very generally, of Korean RPGs, which is the story. There's nothing wrong with the story, and the story itself is fast-paced enough for me to be interested to ponder what could have possibly happened in the prequel, and that's actually pretty rare. If you usually play a sequel, normally, they don't actually make you kind of ponder what happened in the prequel, but I think this game does a good job of doing so. But, the characters are pretty canonical, and the story flow is pretty linear so far. For example, you can pretty much guess what Len is going to say after some time, and it's kind of repetitive what she says, although, oh my gosh, the voice acting is actually really good. I think the additional dialogues as you travel and walk around is a nice touch, and the plentiful amount of pretty cinematic scenes help what makes a rather obvious storyline seem a lot more interesting than it could actually be. Now, if there's a giant twist waiting for me at the end of the story, now that will be very good, and the game kind of set itself up to have that great ending if it does. And I'll just have to kind of keep playing through and see what happens. I know they've been releasing new chapters pretty regularly. I'm secretly thinking that Fine is going to be the Dark Lord incarnate or something like that, but maybe that's a little bit too obvious, but yeah, anyway, enough about the story, let's move on to the gameplay. Now, I usually play on 2 phones at once to save time and be able to catch up faster on my dailies by doing so on the mini games that I want to try out. And for me, in that sense, 7 Nights is perfect because of its pretty neat auto battle system that works pretty well for most of its content. Now, I know some of you guys are be like, well, why do you play a game if it's going to be auto? But just hear me out. The game is technically a limited open world, open team battle system, very similar to a few Final Fantasy series. I wouldn't call it a true open world because you do have to enter into different instances and explore it openly once you enter the instance. And a lot of the other game content also makes you enter into these dungeons or separate instances as well. The game allows you to have a 4-team setup plus a pet that you can set up with different formations that give different buffs based on the formation. The autoplay is pretty fluid with the option to customize a little bit. You just set up the team leader, and if you place them in auto battle, the team will follow the team leader and finish off tasks accordingly. Now, there is a pretty good balance between content where you can't autoplay and expect to win, unless of course you're outrageously out-leveled or out-geared for that particular content. And for example, some bosses require you to move out of their skill range or use a certain skill with a certain hero to beat it if you're just around the required level, so you do have to manually maneuver, or the other option would be just to become so OP that it doesn't actually matter anymore. And this is especially true with the raids and some of the material dungeons. Now, the raids and the material dungeons and the Celestial Tower are gated by the daily tickets, which is pretty typical. And another thing that's gated by the tickets in the game is PvP. Now, PvP PvP in this game is auto only, I believe, which actually doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, there are some winning strategies for weaker teams to win if like maneuvered correctly, I think, on the battlefield, but it could be precisely because of the many variations that could happen in PvP. If they don't make it auto, that would become like a programming nightmare. I guess that's maybe why they didn't do it. So right now, PvP is pretty boring to watch since most of the time you have like the heroes bunched up in the middle, so you don't even know who is doing what except for like the little icons at the top that kind of tell you who's attacking what, but you kind of have to literally just sit there and watch them like hack at each other, which is less interesting because they're not even moving around the screen in that instance. So it basically comes down to which hero you have and which equipment you have. The nice thing about the game is that some of the lower tier heroes do make great team contributions, especially in PvE, so you don't have to have all legendary heroes to have a good gameplay experience, minus higher tiers in PvP, but that's like that in most games anyway. That kind of ties in with the gacha system, which I have to say, it's not the best. I mean, it's not the worst, but it's kind of leaning towards the worst side. So this game takes a little bit more of a Princess Connect or Punishing Gray Raven system where you have different tiers of heroes and each tier counts as a different hero. So you can have like a normal land and like the super cool legendary land, and they're considered different heroes although they're the same character. Every time you pull the same copy of the hero, you get their fragments, which are used to transcend them so you can release the level cap and level them higher. The regular land fragments are not the same as the legendary ones, so you can't use them interchangeably. Obviously, it's hard to get the legendary copies, so in the beginning, if you're not spending money, your regular hero version just might be a little better than the legendary version, which is kind of stuck at a lower level because of the lack of the fragments. Because let me tell you, buying summons in this game is like not cheap. Their shop is not the best. The shop doesn't really offer any benefits, especially for the value in my sense, like not at all. The gacha system exists for pets, equipment, and the heroes. I mean, so far as I'm playing through, the game is giving decent amount of gems and free summon tickets, but like most games, I can see this like as the initial push to get players up and going, but it's gonna dry up and it'll be expensive to get the higher tier heroes. I've done a decent number of pulls and I've pitied a legendary hero, but I'm at the point where I'm trying to gather enough shards to transcend my legendary heroes, and I think it's gonna take some time because there's a limited number of shards that you could exchange per day too. I think what adds a little fuel to the grind is that the equipment enhancement system is also like a gacha in the sense that it's random. Like higher tier equipment require higher enhancement materials and enhancement can fail. And failure to enhance is not uncommon, sure, but it's hard when the materials for enhancement is not shared across all the levels of equipment tier content. And it's a very similar process for the pet system as well in this game. Phew, okay, so I kind of dived a little bit into like the whole hole of darkness, but let's jump back up to the sunny side. There is actually quite a lot of content that you could enjoy in the game, so much so that playing casually, it might take you a couple days to get caught up with everything. Many of the content comes from various currencies that you need in the game, which in turn can be used to improve your team, and having different currencies means that you have just that much more customization in leveling up certain aspects of your team formation. I can arguably say, being in the early stages, there isn't that many heroes, not that much equipment variations or pets, but it looks like they are continuously adding a little bit more of that content into the game. Each story stage also has like an easy, normal, hard, and very hard mode, introducing like a challenge aspect and a high replay value to the game. It is a pretty massive game, and I don't just mean the app size, which by the way is about 6 gigs by the way, but I don't blame it because the game does have very good graphic renders and many cutscenes, and has the potential to grow so much more as new adventures unlock. If I could suggest anything for the game, I think they need to have better events and possibly add in a better PvP system. And that's coming from me that I don't actually have a big interest in PvP to begin with in any game. I do think an additional gacha system may help too, because it is quite difficult to get legendary hero dupes, and earning enough fragments to the raid will take a long time due to the ticket gate. All that's to say, I'm really enjoying the experience still, even though I'm just about going over that honeymoon phase, and I just think it's so hilarious because I use Shane, like the antagonist, like the evil lady of the story in my group, so it's kind of funny and ironic to have her on my side fighting her herself, because she's all evil and all that, but she's also very cool, so I can't take her out of my team. And she's also a pretty good hero overall in the game. I think if you're considering playing this game, you should go in with the expectation of the eventual grind. You can grind in this game, which is different from, let's say, like Exos Heroes. So even after you finish your dailies, you can use your maps in order to kind of go explore different regions of the story and kind of defeat monsters in order to grind up EXP and other items.
That was the right decision. I may be ashamed of it, but I don't regret it.
Okay, so that's kind of like my initial thought. Have you tried Seven Nights too? Are you playing it now, or did you play the original version? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you like Gacha gaming content, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more every Wednesday and weekends. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay safe and take care.